Hello and welcome to the second episode of Dizzycast, a Diagnostic Dizzy, as Dizzy has been on a little mission the last month to find out the best advice for people that are newly diagnosed with MS. Before we get to that though, we're joined by Christian, who's going to be talking to us about his experiences with relapsing remitting MS, which has now progressed into secondary progressive, and the differences that he's experiencing between the two of them. We're then going to be joined by the wonderful Jen and Robert again for this month's Dizzy discussion, which is on advice for people that are newly diagnosed. Not only are we going to be sharing our own stories and what advice we were given, we're also going to be discussing what we think is the best advice for people. So we really hope that you enjoy the show, and I'll see you in a minute. Bye! Hi Christian, thank you for joining us.
Hi Heather.
Get us started off, could you please just tell us when you were diagnosed and kind of what were your original symptoms?
I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting in 2007. My first symptoms were my left hand side of my body, from my top of my head to my toes, would just collapse all down one side, and that would happen like once a day. Then the next day it would happen twice a day, the next day 3 times a day, and until like the height of the attack, it would be one was ending and the next one was starting. They thought that was Bell's palsy at first, so I went into hospital for a week, and at the end of it they said you've got MS. The other symptom I had at that time was optic neuritis, which was very scary, and I was still driving, and I was driving with one eye because I couldn't see.
What? You're literally covering one eye out?
I just used to shut it and then just like lean to one side.
Oh,
so I was driving my kids back from Margate to Maidstone, so about 45-50 minutes at night, and I could just see lights all over the place. It was so dangerous. Nobody seemed to take me serious. It was kind of just a whinge, moaner. I felt like everyone thought I was lazy or just like a sick note, really.
What were they saying it was, though?
No one said anything. No one knew what was going on. So they didn't say what was going on, and it's really hard to explain these weird things that are happening. And so you'd say, and people would just pour a funny face like you're mad. So yeah, and eventually I saw a doctor. He wasn't my doctor. He wasn't there. He sent me for a blood test. But when I returned, I saw my own doctor. He had me pigeon stepping one foot in front of the other around his surgery. And after I finished that, he sent me to the hospital. So I think he knew what was going on a bit more than the original doctor that saw me. So yeah, and then I spent a week in hospital. They let me out at the weekend to watch the Merseyside derby and the Rugby World Cup final, and then so they obviously didn't think it was life-threatening. I went back into the hospital, and they diagnosed me with MS. The thing they got me to do was the 1 foot in front of the other little test that we all do every time we go and see a neurologist.
Oh yes, I'm always really good at that though. I always think, oh look, I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm getting better. The pigeon step one, I don't know why, but that's just one of the tests. Amongst about 3 or 4 others normally they get me to do, that I failed back in 2007, and I definitely failed in 2017, but they still make me do them.
You have to do them every time, because the first time I saw a neurologist I had to do them all, but I did them all perfectly, so I was like, oh, it can't be that bad because I'm doing it all.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know, the lady down at the therapy centre, she says, oh, your balance is good. I think it's horrendous, but she says every time I stand up and she sees me stand up, she makes a comment about how good I am, and it reminds me of when I was first diagnosed, that I felt like I wasn't disabled enough sometimes. So it's not a nice feeling sometimes. I wish she wouldn't say it, actually. So.
Yeah, but I think it's a bit different, because they say to me like my balance is really good, but then if I'm out walking about I can feel it all over the place and it feels really bad. And then if they get me stand on one leg, which I can do, they're like, oh, it's really good, look, you're doing that. I'm thinking, well, I can do this, but
yeah, where was that useful?
It's a bit different.
Yeah, definitely. And those little tests, really, they're not in your everyday life. You don't need those skills.
No, and it's like, it's quite nice being able to stand on one leg, but it's not really the most helpful thing to be
No,
able to do.
I won't be doing it again till I see a doctor next year.
Yep.
So that's basically what happened in 2007. And then say you got MS, and then you're just sent home, and there was I was given lots of leaflets, but so many leaflets, I was a bit overwhelmed with that, and I didn't really read those, because by the time it all kind of, I got home and settled down, things had improved. You know, I went back to work and back to playing football and just carried on with life with a young family, and just, you know, you don't get bogged down. Yeah, you can't sort of dwell too much, because not in between the attacks, not a lot was really happening. Because I had an attack back when my children were very little, but I didn't know it was MS back then. And by the time I'd got doctor's appointments and see a doctor, it kind of stopped. So, and then it was 5 years before it happened again, and I was diagnosed. So, you know, it's pretty hard to...
Yeah, it's quite a long gap.
Yeah, so it's pretty hard to get an appointment with a doctor and see a doctor and explain what exactly is going on, because again, some of them look at you like you're talking mad.
Yeah, well, they put it down to like little everyday like stress and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's just other things that are going on, sort of like a smoke screen. Because the attacks last about, I'm pretty textbook, they do last about 6 weeks with me. So, you know, by the time you've sort of seen a doctor, made appointments, 6 weeks could be up sometimes. MS was kind of a relief when I got told I had MS at first. It's kind of, at least people now don't think I'm lazy or don't think I'm mad, or...
Yeah, and you know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, because that's the biggest fear, the biggest scary thing about it, is that you have no idea, and it's you, and there's nobody else experiencing this with you, it's just you, and it's horrendous and so scary. And once you know it's got a name and other people are experiencing this, you can then relax about these weird things that are happening.
Yeah, no, I was exactly the same. I found it more scary before diagnosis, not knowing what was going on, than when I actually had a name to it, and I was like, okay, at least there is some sense
to
what's going on. Relapsing, remitting stage, kind of what was the main symptoms that you had and like effects that it had on you?
I would say the main symptom that I had in between the attacks really was fatigue. Fatigue and vertigo was like the worst.
Same as me.
Yeah, just going out every single day. It was normally 3 o'clock on the minute, that I would just like become like the mist would just fall, and my head was so heavy, and I was just useless for an hour to 2 hours normally, and then I would come out the other side normally. Other days it would be till bedtime, and it would be the next day, if you know, not till the day after that sometimes, but it was every day. And I don't have that now, so you know, that's, you know, my mobility's gone, but I don't have that fatigue, and the fatigue was just as bad, if not worse. It was really awful. The vertigo, I remember, like Tesco's in Broadstairs is on 2 levels, and just coming down the escalator, and it just seems so massive, and the noise from the left, from the right, from above, from below, and it's just like, oh, get me out of here.
Yeah, no, I can't stand supermarkets.
No, supermarkets was shopping centres, so supermarkets. Yeah, and it's just, I don't know, if you go to like a sports venue or a concert or whatever, it wasn't so bad, because the noise, the music, whatever, was in front of me. But when I was like, it just seemed like at a supermarket, it was like I was picking up conversations, like a film on the telly, and they're doing the voices all around, that kind of feeling, and it just makes you feel off balance and sick.
I'm sure it's the lights as well. I feel it as soon as I hit those lights. Yeah,
the lights are terrible. Yeah, see, that was, at that time, that was the only thing really that bothered me. And the rest of the day, I was working, I was functioning as well, what I perceived as normal. It was just the fatigue would hit, and then I was anything but normal.
How often did you have relapses during that time?
Relapses, once I got diagnosed, it was every couple of years for the first bit. Probably between going from diagnosis to secondary, probably I had about three relapses, yeah.
Were you on any medication over that time? Did you start on anything?
No, back then you were offered no medication, because the thinking was that they weren't going to treat your MS until it was active enough to be of any bother to you. So let's say between 2007 and 2010, not much had happened. They didn't offer me anything, but then they did offer me Copaxone eventually, said to take that, but I wasn't on that for very long, really, about a year, I would say.
And was that when you started to notice the difference from like the relapsing remitting to the secondary?
Well, I suppose I did, but I went into hospital for some intensive physio, yeah. And I remember one of the nurses making a comment about me scaring the life out of her, because one of the tests was me running up and down the corridor. So I could still run, but then when I left that hospital, I left with a walking stick. And when I went in to see Dr. Harry Krishnan, my neurologist, he asked me, have I had an attack? And I said no. And he said, well, I think you've gone over to secondary, because I didn't have a walking stick last time I saw him. So that's how he decided I was secondary.
Just because of that one thing?
Just because of coming in with a walking stick. And so many other people have said similar things, that they've walked into their neurologist with either a stick or a Zimmer or a scooter or whatever, and not had an attack. So that's how they then say, well, you've not had an attack, you've got worse, you're secondary. Stereotypical MSer, that's how they do it. I mean, they say within 10 to 15 years of having MS, you move over to secondary.
Yeah, I think that's like the average.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty average.
Was it like 10 years then? Is that the amount of time that you had relapsing remitting for?
Well, I think I had, like I said, I had that attack when my daughters were about 1 to 2, so that's about 16 years ago. So that's 2001. I got diagnosed in 2007. About 10 years, yeah. No, I might have had it even before then, but to say the dropping of the face, that happened in 2001, 2000, and obviously it went away, and then it didn't come back until 2007 when I got diagnosed.
So did you have any idea that it was secondary when you went to see him, or did you just think it was a normal checkup?
No, I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea, and when he said it, it hit me like a juggernaut, and he wanted to take me off Copaxone. And in my mind, I'd been on Copaxone nearly a year, and in that time, I hadn't had an attack. So, in my mind, Copaxone was working. Yeah, and I managed to talk him into letting me stay on it for another 6 months. And in that time, I sort of come to terms with what he said made sense. Because at the time, my thinking was, what do you mean? I haven't had an attack, I'm absolutely fine. Well, when he said, you've got worse, it's not working, that made sense after that. Well, it probably wasn't as long as 6 months, but in that time I decided that he's right, and he kind of knows his job better than I do.
I suppose it's just like you don't want to be taking injections every day if they're not actually doing anything.
No, because taking the injection in itself was an ordeal. I hated it.
I hate injections.
Yeah, I hate injections, and some of them stung like mad, and I really hated it. And the thought of having to do that again fills me with dread. And so for me to argue to stay on it, I must have been mad.
So did he offer you any other sort of treatment or anything that you could do to help?
No, there was no offer of anything back then. And so you just had your secondary progressive, come back in a year.
So how has your MS been different since going into secondary progressive to when it was relapsing remitting?
Well, I would say it's easier to deal with in a way that my fatigue it's still bad, but it's not anywhere near what it was, and it normally coincides with me overdoing it, whereas before there was no reason for me to have fatigue. It was just bad, whatever I did, whether I was sitting down doing nothing all day or 10-mile jog. I never did a 10-mile jog in my life, but there you go.
I find that really weird though, that it's like changed.
Yeah, no, it is easier to deal with. And if you said, do you want to come for a drink on Friday, when I was relapse remitting, I would be scared to say yes because I wouldn't know how I was going to feel. Whereas now, on Friday, I'm going to be like this. So I'm not the best, you know, but I will be like this. So I can make a decision on whether or not I want to go for a drink.
That is a positive thing from it, because I'm the same as like how you used to be, so I don't know whether I'm going to be really exhausted and can't go, or whether it's going to be a day where I'm like a little bit better. So it's really difficult to ever actually properly commit to anything.
Yeah, I do think you still get tired and you still get the fatigue, but it just seems to be, it's not as foggy, it's not as heavy and not as foggy, and you see, you can deal with it. And even if you felt like this in the pub and you felt like you wanted to go home, you might feel like you want to go home, but when you have fatigue, when you've relapsed remitting, you would have to go home.
There's no choice.
There's no choice, and it's just like now I've got a choice. I can say yes or no with a clear mind, and what, you know, if I say no, that means I don't like you.
I'll bear that in mind.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated though that it changes. I really want to know like why that is.
Yeah, it is odd, but it's definitely weird, because at the time you think fatigue's horrendous, but you worry about not being able to walk. But not being able to walk is obviously not great, but it's something you can adapt and deal with. Whereas the fatigue, you're just so...
You can't.
No, you just can't bog it. You can't wait for it to clear. You can't say it's going to clear in half an hour, 2 hours. It could be there, set in for the day or
the next week.
Yeah, it's just unbearable. And people say, I remember somebody said to me once, I was going somewhere and I said, I hope the fatigue's not bad tomorrow. And she said to me, well, it can't be. It's like, what do you mean, well, it can't be? It is or it isn't. It's not a choice thing.
That'd be great just to be like, yeah, we're not going to have that tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm going to do my fatigue week now, so next week I won't have fatigue at all.
I'll plan it out so you can be
exactly.
on Monday.
Fatigue diary.
So is it the mobility that's the main thing that has been affected since?
Now, I would say it's 95% mobility, I'd say now.
Yeah.
And 5% fatigue, it's whereas, you know, but the mobility was like, it was always going from about 2009-10, slowly, but it's hardly noticeable. I mean, people used to say to me, have you got a limp? Have you got a limp? And I didn't even notice it. Other people noticed it, but I didn't even notice it. So that has gone. I don't know where I got from playing football to being in a scooter. I don't know how I got here, because it's been such a slow, gradual. Yeah, and it's just Facebook when it throws up 4 years ago you were doing this, and there's a picture of me in the sea holding my daughter's hands and things, and it's just wow. I thought I've been on the scooter for years now. It's weird. Mobility. Yeah, that's the boss now.
I do like your little scooter though.
Yeah, everyone loves my little scooters. Everyone says to us, are you racing? No racing, no racing.
How fast do they go?
They go 4.1. The 0.1 is very important, miles per hour.
I love the 0.1, like why did you add that on?
Yeah, why would you say that? Why would you say that?
4.1.
0.1, yeah, so this is like, there's other scooters that only go 4 miles an hour.
So this is like the top one to get.
This is the one, if you're racing, this is the one.
So even though they didn't have any medication options, you did do a trial recently. So what was the reasoning behind that?
The reason behind it was because I felt my MS was just getting worse, and I was just allowing it to happen. I wasn't doing anything, and by that I mean taking any tablets. There isn't anything, so I felt a little bit helpless that I wasn't doing anything. So the chance to get on the trial was like, just gave me a purpose, and even just taking the tablet, even if it was placebo, gave me kind of a purpose that I know I was doing something to...
Yeah, gives you a bit of control.
Yeah, and I got onto that, and it was a 2-year trial. There were 3 drugs that are already available, so if they prove to have helped, they're already available for other conditions. There's one for heart disease, motor neurones, and one for depression, and they've shown promise previously for slowing down holding progression. So hopefully one of them. And I didn't get any worse whilst I was on those. I mean, the tests that they did at the beginning and then after a year and at the end, I either got better or stayed the same on all of those tests.
Was it your neurologist that suggested it to you?
No, I found it. I just Googled it. I just found it and then just applied and got on it. There was 2 other trials that I'm doing that run along, which were optional, which run alongside it as well. There's one which is the lumbar punch, which is great fun.
I love it.
I've had 3 of those now, so it's great. So number 1 and number 3 were fine, but the one in the middle laid me up for about a week.
Oh.
It was horrendous. That is I found out on the 3rd one why they're doing it. I didn't even ask any questions before. They take the lumbar nectar,
stuff.
yeah, and they test for the amount of debris in it. So if the tablets were working, then the amount of debris would be less.
Okay.
And then the other one was they take a picture of your eye, they break it down into like loads, and you had to stay still for like on one of those opticians machines where you put your chin on.
Yeah.
You had to stay still for about 20 minutes, and if you moved, they had to start again. But they reckon they can tell the speed of progression through a thickness of one of the layers of the eye. And the other part of the trials, we had to do an MRI. You had to do an eye test at the optician, but the letters were like invisible. You had to try and focus on these invisible letters that were there, but you could hardly see them, and they just got fainter and fainter and fainter. And it's really tiring. So drive up to London, do like, I think I was there about 9 in the morning to about 7 at night.
See, that's exhausting in itself.
Yeah, but just in between, you had to do once a month. You just had to drive up there to collect your tablets and a blood test. But the one at the beginning, the one after a year, and the one after 2 years at the end was an all day.
When do you get all the results for it?
The results, the last person on the trial finishes in April, and then they said that it takes 6 months to a year to compile the results. So you're looking at 2019 at the earliest.
Oh, it's quite a long time still.
Yeah, but they said that if the tablets were proven to have helped me, then get back on them. But in my mind, that's July this year that it stopped for me. So that's a year and a half not been taking them. So
yeah, I kind of think if the progression was staying the same, I don't see why I can't just leave you on it.
It's a shame. It's just I don't know, just the way it is. But they wouldn't let me know. They don't actually know. So it's like a sealed envelope thing.
Yeah, until it all comes in and they can look at it all.
So nobody knows what's going on. But it was good. And then at the end of it, I got a little bit depressed for about a week or two, where I felt, like I say, the tablets was my little crutch, really. And then having that taken away, I did get a little bit low about that.
And it's doing something that helps other people as well, because it does prove to be useful. Then it means that other people will be allowed to have it. Yeah,
that's what I said. Because when I first did the trial, I said no to the lumbar punch, and they said to me, "You don't have to do it, but we'll know more about MS if you do it."
Oh.
And then they put me in the MRI, and the MRI was 1 hour 18 minutes. And by the end of the MRI, I come out and went, "Yeah, go on then, I'll do it."
Just do it.
They guilted me into doing it.
Did they do it straight away? Did they quickly hurry you off?
It wasn't straight away. No, it was I had a couple of hours, but it was. It's a weird thing. It doesn't really hurt. The anaesthetic was the most painful part. It's got like sharp prick in my back.
That's what I found. I found the anaesthetic bit kind of hurt, but then the other bit is just like the weirdest sensation. Yeah, I think my left leg kicked out, like someone had banged tested my reflexes. Oh yeah.
At one point, but it didn't do it on the second and third one. It was just on that first one. So I was expecting it, the second and third, and it never happened. But other than that, you could feel it, but it didn't hurt.
That's what mine was like, because I got in such a state about it for literally weeks. The first one, I'd been at King's all day and I even went home before they could do it. I sat there for like 2 hours and they were down the corridor going, we can't get the fluid out of this man, and they kept going backwards and forwards and I was just like, I can't do it. After like the third time them going like, we can't get it out, it's not working, I just thought, no, I can't. I just left. But then I went back and it really wasn't that bad.
No, well, it is the fault. And at the end of it, I did feel like I'd had a major trauma.
Yeah.
But if you boil it down, I was worse for the blood test. And I'm really bad at the blood tests, and that's more of an ordeal. But because of what it is and the length of the needle and everything else, it was.
It's the thought of it as well.
It's the fault.
One last question. For our next bit, we're doing advice for people that are newly diagnosed. What would be your top piece of advice to someone that is newly diagnosed with MS?
My top advice would be just to carry on as you were. Don't say no to too many things. Just try and do as much as you can when you can. I know people say don't overdo things because you pay for it, but I kind of feel that you should do as much as you can, really. There's lots of things out there that are available for us, like Sportability. They do activities for all levels of disability, so beginners to advanced like myself. Just try and do as much as you can for as long as you can.
Brilliant, thank you. And where can people find you online? I know you've got 2 Facebook groups.
I've got 2 Facebook groups. My own group is called MS Up. That's MSED Up. And also there is one called YUMS, which is YUMS, which is Young United with Multiple Sclerosis. We were young when it was all started, and now we're 40 odd, and still young of heart.
Yeah, it's easy to remember as well. Yums, it makes me think like yummy.
Yummy. Yeah. Sometimes there's cake.
See, so it fits.
Yeah, we meet up. I think month before last, there was a new lady called Sharon. She turned up and she baked a cake and she brought it with us, which was very yummy.
Oh, see, it's perfect. Thank you, Christian. Speak to you later.
Speak to you later. Thank you very much. Bye.
But Dizzy didn't become a tingly hoof-free donkey. She did what all the other little donkeys had said. She drank more water, didn't stand as much when selling the ginger nut biscuits, and she only sprang around on the grass. Not only was she still not a tingly hoof-free donkey, she was even more of a tingly hoof donkey than before. It now spread to all of her little hooves and up her legs. Dizzy was not sure about this at all. She couldn't think what would be causing it. A few more weeks went past and the tingling was increasing, and Dizzy was now getting lots of pain in her little legs too. Sometimes at night she couldn't even sleep because of it, and Dizzy is a donkey who loves her sleep. It was even putting her off her ginger nut biscuits. Dizzy decided that she had had enough of this, and that it was best to go and visit the donkey doctor to find out what was going on. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Dizzy Discussion. We're really happy because we're joined by Robert and Jenny again. Hi you two.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Our discussion today is on newly diagnosed advice for people that have just been diagnosed with MS. So first off, could you just say briefly when you were diagnosed and if it was a diagnosis that you were expecting at the time?
So I was diagnosed actually in 1994. I was 15 years old, so it was quite a long time ago now. I would say it definitely wasn't, from my point of view, expected at all. My parents, I think, suspected what it was because my dad's a GP and my mum was a physio, and they'd obviously seen the symptoms and the fact that I had this relapse and kind of knew what it was without mentioning it to me until I had to see the doctor. But yes, it was completely unexpected, I have to say. It wasn't something that I really knew about. I didn't know about MS. I didn't think about it at age 15. So yeah, completely unexpected for me.
Yeah, because I didn't even know anything about it when I was like 24 when I started getting symptoms. So I imagine at 15 it's not even something that's
it was strange.
Sort of become aware of.
It was almost like I knew I had something that kind of affected my leg, but then it got better, and I kind of thought, oh, it was just one of those things. It didn't even cross my mind that it would be anything serious at all. I just thought it was a strange thing my body was doing.
And it would just sort of wear off and get better.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Me, I was, it's very coincidental. I was diagnosed, I think it was in 93, and I can't remember, it's a long time ago, but I first had numb feet, and I was living in London at the time, and I had gone back to my university for our graduation, and on the trip back my feet were numb, and I thought it was kind of odd. And when I came back to London after that, I went to the doctor, various different things, and within 3 months I was diagnosed with MS, and I knew nothing about the illness. Nothing at all.
That's really quick, though. That's really quick to get a diagnosis.
I was incredibly lucky, I suppose, in that the GP that I went to, she had MS herself, right? And then she referred me to a neurologist whose specialty was MS, and it was in Queen Square in London. So they were doing, gadolinium enhanced MRI scans at the time, and that was very new, and so I was diagnosed very quickly. It was, but I had a lumbar puncture, and I had all the kind of the eye tests, and various different sensory stuff, and they found oligoclonal banding in my cerebrospinal fluid. So that combined with the relapsing remitting aspect of it, it was more or less decided.
Did you already kind of know that it was going to be MS? Was it something that you thought about, or was it just completely out of the blue?
Had absolutely no clue. Couldn't even consider what it was. It was kind of, I had numb legs, and then they got better, and then they got worse again, and then they got better, and I had kind of bladder problems, but that was all in a very short space of time, literally within months. And I had no idea. And when I went to the doctor, it was the day after my birthday, if I remember. And,
oh no!
Yeah, and I went into him, and he said, "Robert, I think that's it. You've got multiple sclerosis." He said, it's a relapsing remitting form, and it's mainly spinal, he thinks, because they saw no lesions in my brain. And he said, all you can do now is, go home.
I just can't believe how quick it was, because I was diagnosed 3 years ago, but I had months of just the doctors telling me that it was stress, and that I had ear infections, and just sort of anything simple to sort out was what they were putting it down to. Mm-hmm. So in the end, I ended up going on Google, which I'm never sure is the best option or not. But I had so many symptoms by that point, because I was getting a new one sort of every week, that it was pretty much the only option. Mm-hmm. So it ended up me finding a specialist and sort of pushing for the diagnosis of MS, even though before that I'd never even really heard of it or knew anything about it.
Okay.
And that's the thing I was going to say. I think for me and Robert, it was kind of pre-Google days.
Yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that we could just kind of suddenly look into and find out more about unless the doctor was telling us. Mine was actually, I suppose, relatively quick in a way, in that although I had optic neuritis when I was 13, so 2 years previously, they didn't even say anything about MS then. It was when I had my second relapse, so I had some numb legs, that I then saw the neurologist and saw kind of the GP about that, and then I was diagnosed within a week or so of actually going to see the neurologist. Yeah.
Yeah, because mine just completely, even the ones that I was brave enough to say I think it's MS to, they were like, no, it's not, that only affects one side at a time, and they were coming up with really weird answers, but it was just always like, it's stress. But the problem was, by that point I was getting stressed, so I was like, well, I'm stressed now. Were you given any advice when you were diagnosed, sort of how to deal with it, or anything about the future and what would be the best options to take?
I wasn't given any advice, but then it's quite hard. I mean, I don't know how realistic or not realistic, that's not the right word, but how representative my experience was, because I was so young. A lot of it was done through my parents. So, for example, it wasn't actually the neurologist who told me about MS. It was actually my parents who sat me down, because they'd been told. So they sat me down and told me I had MS. They gave me some the dad had sent away to the MS Society in Canada, actually. So I don't even know if the MS Society was very active here in Britain at the time. I'm not sure. So he gave me some information, but everything in the pack said, oh, you know, you just have to live your life and there's nothing you can do to help, you know.
That was it.
Diet. Yeah. There wasn't anything kind of, you know, there wasn't even very much information on medicine because that was quite new. So yeah, no, I didn't have any information at all from anyone really, apart from what I read from the MS Society. Yeah.
Did your parents know much about it though? Were they able to help?
They did know about it. It was interesting actually. It was the one time I've ever seen my dad cry. So that's when I realised, because he's normally kind of, you know, typical strong father figure, and it's just that's how I knew it was something serious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because that must have been really hard.
Yeah, because he said, well, you know, you've got multiple sclerosis, and so they obviously knew what it was. You know, my mum works with, or at the time worked with actually stroke patients, but she, you know, so she worked with adults, and in her experience, she'd worked with people with MS, and my dad was a GP, so he knew, he'd been kind of involved with people who've had MS, so they knew, but they didn't have any particular advice to give me about that. You know, they just kind of, I think for them it must have been so scary. They kind of think, oh gosh, their little girl has MS. For them it must have been just as scary, if not more so than for me, because I was oblivious, really.
Yeah, and for me, I suppose very similar to you, Jen, because when I was diagnosed, which was maybe just a little bit before you, maybe a year or two, but it was in London, and the neurologist said to me, the only thing he said that you can do is live a healthy life, continue doing what you're doing, don't necessarily change your lifestyle. He did recommend using evening primrose oil, which I have been using every day since then. So for 25 years, I've been, you know, swallowing evening primrose oil, and I don't know whether that has helped or not, but, you know, generally, I think it's pretty good. And but he was actually, I got in touch with the MS Society, and I visited with them, and I went to a couple of their socials, and that to me was the most frightening bit about MS, is because I saw elderly people, and they were in wheelchairs, and they were kind of covered up, and they were like, it was very daunting, because there I was still able to walk, I was fine, but everybody that I saw was in a very bad state. And so the impression I got of MS was, oh my God, this is it. Like, life is over. Okay. And that was actually the most difficult bit about it. And then the only information I had, because this was pre-Google, pre-internet, was the encyclopedia, and that was saying, you know, it's a degenerative disease, and, you know, it wasn't very positive. And so that was very tough at the time. And I was, I was very, very shocked. But then I made a decision to kind of forget about all of that. And my father had done a huge amount of research, and I have an aunt in the United States, and she got information about the swank diet. And so I went onto that, which was a low fat, no product from a cow, no milk, no dairy, no beef. And I went onto that diet, and I think that was actually beneficial to do that at the very beginning of my illness. And I was very, very good at maintaining that diet. And I generally have stuck to it over the years. There's been times when I've fallen off the wagon, but I'm back on again. And I think is possibly the most beneficial bit, diet and maybe mental attitude, I think.
Yeah, because me and Jenny follow the RRMS diet, which comes from the swank diet. So we pretty much all follow the same one.
Yeah.
Advice-wise, I wasn't really given anything either. It was very much just sort of go and live your life and get on with it. Mm-hmm. I always remember the neurologist, his one piece of advice was he looked at me and went, well, you can still eat, talk and walk, so like go live your life. And I remember thinking, why has he said these three things? Like Yeah, so it was more of a bit of a worry than a positive go out into the world and live your life kind of advice, and that was pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Were you given any bad advice? I'm guessing not, if you weren't really given any.
Well, I was going to say, I wasn't really given very much advice at all, but I suppose, like Robert said about, the swank diet, I wish that I'd started OMS from the start, because I remember specifically, my dad specifically saying, is there any, food or anything? No, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that was actually, now in hindsight, that's bad advice. But I mean, the research was already there. Like Robert said, the research was there in the 90s around swank, just people discredited it. They didn't, for some reason, they didn't, I don't know, it didn't see him as legit, I think, in the neurology circles. So it's very frustrating from that point of view, because I do think that if there's lots of research now that if you do start that early on in the disease, then that can have a very positive impact on whether you progress or not. So yeah, I'd say bad advice was that actually there's nothing you can do to help, because there is stuff you can do to help.
Yeah, and I think that makes it really difficult when people say that as well, because you kind of think, give me something that I can help to make myself get better. But people are just like, well, just see what happens. Like, because my neurologist said whatever happens is going to happen with it. And I sort of thought, oh, that's really downhearted. I can't do anything.
What surprised me is that the medical profession only looked at my MS as my MS and didn't look at me holistically. I think that is the biggest issue, I think, with the medical profession, is that they just want to deal with one small aspect and they don't look at the whole body. And the recommendation should always be, I think, from a doctor, you should eat very healthily, very well, have no junk food in your diet. It doesn't matter what illness you have. The first thing that you should do is you should make sure that your body is as healthy as it can be, And like I even look at in this last week, my partner had a very bad cold, like a flu, temperature, the whole lot. And I've kind of passed by that unscathed. And that's because I've got a really, really healthy diet. So my body's as strong as it can be. And so that I think that helps. I think that helps so much. And I don't think the medical profession really, in general, acknowledges the benefit of diet.
So what advice would you give to people that have just been newly diagnosed? Now that you are on the internet and everything, what would you give people?
I think I would say don't Google and look for the worst case scenario. It's very tempting to do, but actually, having lived with MS for 25 plus years or something, or almost 25 years, it's not, this can sound silly, but it's not as bad as you can, as people make out. There's highs, there's kind of low points, but there's also some really high points, and actually you just get on with your life. I mean, that sounds kind of going against what you're saying, do things like look into your diet, try and be as healthy as you can be despite the MS, and just keep living and keep doing everything you want to do. There shouldn't be anything that you can't do, even though you have MS.
I completely agree with that, because I think the problem is with online, because I did that, I Googled for like weeks, so I came across a lot of really, really sad stories. So you kind of start to end up thinking that that's the norm of the condition, which was absolutely terrifying. But then you kind of learn, okay, that can happen to some people, but actually most people, like you say, do go on to live normal lives and can do everything that they still want to. So I think Google's fine, but just as long as you're careful about where you're Googling, not just kind of anywhere and kind of reading everyone's stories. Be a bit careful about proper charity sites that give a more, I suppose, like wide opinion and a more truthful, normal.
Yeah, but I also think it's so. The one thing that I would say to people who are newly diagnosed is that MS, and I think we all say this, MS doesn't define you. It's not who you are. It's just a part of you. And you should focus on the things that you can do and on your strengths and on your abilities. And I think it's so easy to fall into the trap of looking at the fact, I can't walk very well, or I'm susceptible to cold, or I have, numbness or pain, or whatever it is. You need to look at the things that you can do. And there are people around who have MS who have illustrious careers, that are writers, that are actors, that are running big businesses, who it will not limit you, but it's up to yourself if you decide to put the limits on yourself. So I think the one thing that I would say to people with MS, and I agree with both of you, is that it's not limiting. It won't necessarily stop you, but you need to acknowledge the things that you can't do and not focus on them. Focus on the things that you can do.
That's right.
Yeah. What about support-wise? Because Robert, I know you said that you went to a couple of MS Society meetings that wasn't great for you at the time, but where do you think it's good to get support?
That's a very difficult one for me, because I am very much a loner. I'm not big into, social events and, groups and that type of stuff. I'm not good at that.
I'm not either, so don't worry.
So and maybe that's a mistake that I made at the beginning, is I didn't find the right support networks, which would have been important. But for me, I have to say my family was critically important for me. The support that my parents gave me, the support that my aunts and uncles, the extended family, my brother and sister, they all rallied around me at the time. And I was in London. I came back to Ireland because I just couldn't work in London anymore. And I came back, and the support that I got from them and their acknowledgement of my illness was fantastic. And that for me was very important. But I know not everybody has that same degree of support. And you need to have good friends, you need to have strong friends. And I think that's probably more important than necessarily going to MS societies and stuff, because they're focused more on the illness rather than you as a person and what you need to develop and grow. So to me, you need a network outside of MS rather than an MS network.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it was hard when I was younger, actually, because in terms of friends, my friends obviously didn't understand, and they didn't, I don't think they knew how to support me, if that makes sense. But I would say, like Robert said, my family, they have been absolutely brilliant. I think because my early MS was was very mild. I mean, I actually was considered as having benign MS at one point, because my relapses were so few and far between. I didn't want to be part of the whole MS group, like Robert said. I don't want to go to these meetings where people who are much more disabled than I was are there. I didn't kind of see myself as part of that. But what I would say is that as my MS has kind of, I'm now in the secondary progressive phase, so I do have kind of obvious disability and things like that, and obviously lots of emotional things that go with that. And I'd say that in terms of support, the online community, so just being able to be here and chat to you guys through friends that we've made online, or through blogging and through Twitter, it's a chance for me to, I suppose, to focus on my MS for that time, and then the rest of the time outside of blogging or outside of Twitter, I'm just Jen, and I don't have to think about it. I don't really discuss it with my friends as such, because I have my outlet through social media. I know that wouldn't be for everybody, but for me, it's kind of a nice way to kind of get my MS stuff out there, but then not have to think about it other times, really.
Yeah, which is a really nice way of looking at it. Would you advise people to get involved with the online community from the start, or leave it a little bit and...
I think for me, I didn't obviously at the start because it wasn't there, but also I didn't feel like I needed it. I think if you feel like you have to talk to someone or be just get to know others, because I was very isolated. I still am the only person I know with MS in terms of friendship groups. I live in a really small town, so I think if you feel isolated and you feel like you need to talk to someone about it, then actually there's so much support online. But you kind of have to be careful where you look, because again, you have the doom and gloomers, and then you have people who are trying to think a bit more positively. So I think I would kind of try and steer them towards that, if that makes sense, although it could be hard to find your way, I suppose.
No, I agree with that though, because I've come across a couple of like Facebook pages and chats and things where it is really depressing, and within half an hour I'm feeling really depressed, and I'm like, oh, it's just like pointless. So I think it is very important to be careful about where you are and the kind of people that you're talking to, just so you do feel a bit more optimistic.
Yeah, and supported rather than just kind of someone bringing you down because they feel down themselves, you know.
Yeah, which is really difficult. Robert, how about you? So I know you didn't have it when you were diagnosed, but would you advise people to get involved with it now?
I believe it or not, because I didn't get involved with the online community until maybe 4 months ago, when I decided I was going to write a blog, and I had no connection with it at all, zero. And since I have been actively online through Facebook and Twitter and the blog, I've been amazed at how supportive the community is. And I completely agree with both of you in that you have to pick the right groups to be part of, because there definitely are groups out there that are very negative, very they're very sad, okay? And I think that's a pity. I love the optimism that you have in your blog, Heather, and you, Jen. It's like, and I think Meg as well with her blog, I find this positivity fantastic. And it's like the days that you feel bad, and that the other people will say, no, it'll be okay, or it's better, or I have been through that too, and you come out the other side. And I think that's really important. And so I think for people who are newly diagnosed, I wouldn't say no about online, but I would say be very careful.
Yeah, and it's finding the places that it's like realistic, because it's like at the same time I don't want to read blogs and stuff that are like everything's wonderful and amazing and perfect, because that's not really realistic. No. But it's the finding realism but also the optimism.
Correct, yeah.
As well. So what one piece of advice would you have given yourself when you were first diagnosed, if you could go back and do that?
Oh, it's hard. I was thinking about this question. I don't really know. I mean, I don't think I would do anything differently apart from look into diet, but I don't know whether at my young age whether I would have stuck to that, you know. I think that's the one piece of advice I would give. I'd go back and I'd say, look into swank and do it, because actually it might have a very positive effect on you long term. But otherwise, you know, I wouldn't change anything. I haven't adjusted anything that I've done. I've, you know, got married, had kids, gone traveling, done all that kind of stuff, and I wouldn't change that for the world. And I like the fact that I kind of, maybe I was a bit naive, but I think that helped. Yeah, I don't think I would change anything really, apart from the diet, really.
Yeah, I think diet of all the things probably is the most important, and I think it seems like we've all looked at our diet critically and did something about it, more or less. But I would say definitely diet, fitness, and just keep that positive mental attitude. Just know that you can do stuff, and it's not a death sentence. It just, you have to adapt your life to suit the illness in some ways, and, you know, just do everything that you can do. But the great thing I think that MS teaches you is that you have to really enjoy the moment, because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You don't know whether you're not going to be able to walk tomorrow, or you're blind, or whatever could happen with your MS. So the thing is, if you have the opportunity to do something exciting or different or whatever, do it. Take the opportunity. And if it's a mistake, it's a mistake. If you did something wrong or whatever, that's okay. But at least you've done it and you've taken the chance. And I think that more than anything else is important. Don't let MS be your excuse not to do something.
I think you're right. It really does change your attitude on how you look at life, and kind of like grabbing opportunities. It really does, and that's one of the positives that comes from it.
Yeah.
Very quickly, Robert, why did your doctor tell you to take evening primrose oil? I'm wondering if I should add it to my list of stuff.
The reason is evening primrose oil has GLA, or gamma linoleic acid, in it.
Oh yeah, I have come across that.
Right, and GLA is the building block for your myelin sheath. So that means that if there is any damage done to the myelin sheath, that your body at least has the building blocks to fix it. Okay, and I use Nodacell Plus, which is evening primrose oil, and it also has fish oil in it as well. So it's got a mix of omega-6 and omega-3. So from that point of view, it is good for your general health. But I actually believe for women, it's meant to be very good for your menstruation or menstrual cycle, which is positive. And the other thing that I find with it, which is, I don't understand it, is if I don't take it, I'm more agitated. But if I do take it, I'm a little bit more relaxed and a bit more calm. So it does have that. Now, maybe that's purely psychological or not, but I have noticed that in the past when I haven't been able to get it for whatever reason. But more or less, I've been taking that every day for the last 25 years.
Oh, I might look into getting that. I didn't know that about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and
I knew about fish oils, but I didn't know that.
No, evening primrose oil, it was one of the early things that they recommended for MS. And I'm very lucky here in Ireland because I get it for free. So the government provides that as one of the treatments for MS with no charge.
Oh, so it really is like highly thought of.
Yeah, it's one of the recommended treatments. It's a bit like vitamin B12 as well, which is also very good. Like I was on a course of an injection once a week for the last 6 weeks on vitamin B12 just for energy levels and, general nerve health. So, it can be, there's those things that you can do that are outside of the medicine thing, which I think are very good.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. I will let you both share your blogs and Twitter again. Robert, I'm sorry last time that I lost your com. I won't do that this time.
It's all right.
So, Robert, do you want to say your blog and Facebook and Twitter?
So I'm on Facebook at A 30-Minute Life, and then Twitter, A 30-Minute Life, and then my website is a30minutelife.com. And yeah, that's it. I'm available, and I've got email address robert@a30minutelife.com.
And this is where I have to try and remember it all. I'm on Facebook at Tripping Through Treacle. I'm on Twitter, I think, at Tripping Treacle, and my website is trippingthroughtreacle.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us again, you two. Speak to you later. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And that's the end of our second show. Thank you so much for joining us. We really hope that you enjoyed it. If you'd like to get in touch, we always love to hear from you. Dizzy gets especially excited. Then you can find us on our website at dinosaurs.donkeysandms.com. You can find us on Twitter at Dizzy the Donkey and Facebook as well, which we've just got. And you can also email us at dizzythedonkey@gmail.com. We really hope that you will have a wonderful start to the new year, and we'll see you soon. Bye.